So we're here in Florida fishing around some today, and faced with some very difficult fishing conditions. We're fishing after a major cold front, the first cold front these fish have had this year. And you know, you can look right there, that's a perfect example. Pretty little fish. That's a perfect example of what these fish down here will do. You know, when you have a cold front condition, a lot of times on certain bodies of water here, the fish can get offshore, and that's what they'll do, but you pretty much always have fish shallow in Florida. And during these cold front conditions, bluebird skies, they're just gonna bury up in the thickest thing that they can find. They find warmth and security in that. They're not real active, and it takes a slower presentation to catch them. That's why flip-in and pitch-in have always been so popular in Florida, especially in the winter months of the year. It's also a great way to catch a great big fish like a female. A lot of times you'll have some males that have moved up, because this is, even though it's wintertime for most of the country, it is the spawning season for your fish here in Florida. Right, so you'll have a male that's moved up there and made a nest waiting for a female to come up and pair with him. And a lot of times those females will slide up in that thick stuff just to kind of warm their body up and kind of incubate the eggs and just get in some thick mat real close to where some males are. And then when she does get ready to spawn, she'll slide over there. So flipping is always a good choice in Florida. You need I like a bait that I can fish slow. This is a Savage Gear Lizard. And really what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna pick apart at the thickest, nastiest looking stuff you can find. And sometimes it's super thick and you've got to use an ounce and a half sinker. Sometimes it's, you know, canes and things like what we have in this lake, or pads. And, you know, I'm getting able to use just a 3/8 ounce. But when you're faced with these cold front conditions all over the country, step one for me has always been to slow down. And step two has been to get in very specific areas and take your time picking those areas apart. When you have cold front conditions, if you want to catch fish, you're gonna have to slow down your presentation. So we got here the Savage Gear 3D Lizard, kind of a new product for Savage Gear. Super realistic lizards, kind of got, you know, some real wide, natural looking appendages on it. It's a lizard, it's a plastic lizard, and there's lots of things you can do with them. To rig this bait, basically I'm pretty much always gonna Texas rig the 3D Lizard, but I use different hooks to kind of match it. So when I say I'm really gonna Texas rig it, as far as installing the hook in the bait, it's pretty much always gonna be Texas rigged. I might fish the bait weightless, I might fish the bait on a Carolina rig, or I might use the bait as a flipping bait, or even just a lightweight Texas rig for casting around. But if I was gonna use the bait for flipping, a big rod and a big line, and I'm in thick cover, I'm gonna use a big heavy gauge straight shank flipping hook. If I was gonna fish the bait weightless and cast it, I would drop down to an EWG style hook. I really like this hook for the lighter line applications. And if I was gonna Carolina rig it, this is actually a heavy gauge EWG, so if I was gonna fish it weightless around grass or cover, I would go with this hook. But if I was gonna put the bait on a Carolina rig and throw it a great distance and want to be able to set the hook relatively easy at that distance, I'd use the same EWG style hook, but I would drop to a lighter wire version. So I'm pretty much always, regardless of how I'm going to fish the bait, I'm practically always going to install the hook in the bait in the form of just a simple Texas rig. If you look out there on the lake, you can see the wind's blowing 25 miles an hour and it's freezing cold. But then you've got this little gem of a corner right here, and it's kind of sheltered from the north wind. This is what I would consider to be a high percentage area on a day like today. It's less damaged by Mother Nature's, you know, introducing the cold front. The water temperature in here probably hasn't fell quite as much because the wind's not blowing on the surface of it. Obviously, you're not going to be able to fish areas like this all day because most bodies of water are not going to have enough of them. But when I get in an area like this, like in a little protected area under these conditions, this is where I'm going to really slow down. And instead of just picking at the high points, I'm going to really slow down and really take my time and fish my way through it and try to maximize the opportunity to get a bite here. And that's, you know, I think that's really important whenever you are faced with any kind of adverse fishing conditions. You know, we all love to go fishing when it's great, but I love to go fishing anytime that I can. And I think that stands for most of us. And typically, that means fishing on days that aren't just picture perfect. That being said, it's really important to me to learn how to let Mother Nature kind of help you sometimes. Even though she's hurting you in the grand scheme of things, let her help you where she can. And, you know, little areas like this after a cold front are a prime example. But you really want to spend your time on those hard days fishing really thoroughly in the highest percentage area that you feel like you can find. and that's where you're going to typically be the most successful. Basically what this is, it's the northern shoreline of this lake, and most lakes in the springtime, the northern shoreline is always a good place to start, just because it's protected from the north wind by the shoreline itself, and it's also the first place in the morning time that the sunshine hits. When I get in here, I feel all nice and warm. I'm not freezing cold like I am when I'm out there. Well, the fish are the same way. They're going to get in an area that provides them with the most protection and the most comfort. It's typically easy to find these areas if you look for the northern shoreline on a bigger lake, or even lakes that have a lot of creeks and nooks and crannies and pockets. Just look for the little pockets and stuff that run due north. It's a great way to find concentrations of fish this time of the year, and it pretty much holds true throughout the entire country. See, he likes the sunshine just like I do. That's a perfect example of what I was talking about earlier. That's just a male fish that's moved up here. We'll want to stay shallow, and we'll want to stay in an area that's protected. So, you know, we got major cold front conditions today, and a lot of bodies of water that does require a finesse approach. But Florida's a little different in that sense, in my opinion. I mean, you can look, I'm still using a big bait, but what I'm doing is I'm still using a relatively big lure, but I'm fishing it in a way different than how I'd fish it if we had better conditions. I'm fishing much slower, and I'm fishing much tighter to cover. There's one. And because of that, because of those fish being tucked back up in there, like that one right there is, I'm using all bigger equipment so that I can get them out of the cover. You know, I mean, I'm using a 7'6" flipping stick, 65-pound test braided line, a ½ ounce weight so that I can get my bait in there tight to the cover, and a big 5/0 straight shank flipping hook. Not what a lot of people would consider to be typical cold front lures or equipment that you would use. And everywhere in the country this doesn't ring true, but if you're in Florida or in a lot of the shallow bodies of water across the southeastern part of the country, or really any time that the fish have already moved shallow and they're wanting to spawn, and then you get hit with one of those last minute cold fronts, just go into the same area that you felt like their fish were trying to use. They're not going to leave. They've already moved in and made their push up to spawn. Go in there and pick apart the thickest, heaviest cover you can find, and use big equipment, but the key to it is you've got to slow down. Because the fish don't want to chase, you've got to put the bait right on their nose to get them to bite. And really flipping and pitching is the absolute best way to accomplish that. So even though these fish yesterday might have bit a moving bait, you could cover a lot more water, and that's typically how I prefer to fish. On a day like today, rather than trying to totally abandon the area that you know there has fish in it, just get you out some bigger equipment that you can fish slower with, and you don't necessarily have to downsize. The main key is that you slow down.